The organizers rubbed their eyes in shock as they observed the vacant seats. In front of a mostly empty stadium, the Berlin Open Final, a showcase that was meant to include some of the top tennis players in the world, was taking place. The explanation was straightforward. A 21-year-old Filipino wild card had won over thousands of fans before losing in the semi-finals. The WTA was shocked. The organizers were in a panic, and the tennis world was finally starting to acknowledge the extraordinary power of the Filipino fan base. The Filipino diaspora had achieved what no marketing campaign could. They filled the stadium, purchased the tickets, and then vanished once their favorite player was gone. When the Berlin Open began on June 14, 2026, in Steffi Graf Stadium in Germany, Alex Eala was anticipated to play a minor role in the competition. The young Filipino star, who was ranked 35th in the world, was a wild card and was predicted to go early. Rather, she turned Berlin's grass courts into her own stage. Her run started modestly when she defeated former Wimbledon semi-finalist Dana Vekic, overcoming a 0-40 deficit in the decisive match to win. Few could have predicted what would happen next, but it was an excellent beginning that suggested something extraordinary was simmering beneath the surface. Elena Rybakina, previous Wimbledon champion and one of the most dangerous players on grass, was ranked second in the world and met Eala in the round of 16. The tennis world would be shocked by what transpired when Eala took the court not just to compete, but also to demonstrate her elite status. She dominated rather than merely competing. The tennis world was rocked by a shocking 7-5, 6-4 triumph, and Filipino fans everywhere were ecstatic. Thousands of supporters who had never thought about visiting Berlin suddenly started making travel arrangements, and social media erupted with expressions of joy and shock. Whereas many who were already residing in Europe changed their plans to see history firsthand. There was now a champion for the Filipino diaspora. One fan wrote, "It's the biggest victory of her career." On grass, she recently defeated the second-ranked person in the world. It's not a drill. For both Alex Eala and Southeast Asian tennis as a whole, the occasion was historic. She solidified her place on the world tennis map by making it to the semi-finals and becoming the first player from the area to reach a WTA 500 semi-final on grass. Eala met world number 8 Alina Svitolina in the quarterfinals, a seasoned veteran who has a reputation for succeeding on the greatest stages of the sport. Eala performed well once more, winning 6-3, 6-4 to advance to the semi-finals and secure a spot in the top 30 worldwide. Eala later remarked, "I don't think there's any more pressure on me than there is on her," exhibiting the assurance and poise of a player who belonged among the best. The mood in Berlin grew more intense with each victory. Filipino supporters who had previously been dispersed around the stands were now hard to ignore as the stadium filled up and the enthusiasm increased. They chanted "Laban Alex" till their voices were raspy, waved flags, and wore their country's colors with pride. Although they were aware of the increasing phenomena, the tournament organizers were unaware of what was going to unfold. They were astounded when they looked at the Berlin Open semi-finals ticket sales. The figures were nearly unbelievable. The semi-finals were attracting even more attention than anyone had predicted, and demand had increased beyond expectations. The stadium's official capacity was exceeded by the unprecedented demand. The organizers were astounded by the numbers they were witnessing, and the cause of the extraordinary increase was fairly straightforward. Eala Alexandra. The Filipino diaspora had mobilized on a level that is uncommon in tennis. In order to witness a 21-year-old Filipino wild card battle on grass against some of the top players in the world, fans traveled from all across Europe, including London, Paris, Rome, Madrid, and Berlin. To participate in the event, many people traveled hundreds of miles, took time off work, and spent large sums of money. In order to handle the increasing crowds, tournament administrators hurried to install more seats, reopen stadium sections that had been shuttered for years, and boost security. During a hurriedly scheduled press conference, a tournament spokeswoman said, "It's unlike anything we've ever seen. We're making every effort to accommodate everyone despite the enormous demand for tickets." However, the shock exposed a more profound reality about the tennis establishment. Both Alex Eala and the enormous influence of the Filipino community had been underestimated. They were going to uncover the same thing that other competitions had found out months before. Never undervalue the impact of Filipino supporters uniting behind their own. In the hopes of obtaining tickets, Fans waited for hours in long lines around Steffi Graf Stadium. Some had come from as far away as Australia, donning the national colors, waving Philippine flags, and shouting Labe and Alex all day long. One fan, a nurse from London, had flown to Berlin just to watch Eala compete, taking 3 days off from work. She sobbed and continued, "I've been following her since she was 16. I never imagined that I would have the opportunity to witness her live performance." This is the realization of a dream. The media was immediately drawn to the remarkable scenes, with German newspapers running. As Berlin welcomed the developing sensation surrounding one of tennis's fastest rising stars, there were major reports about what many called a Filipino invasion of the city. While the WTA, which had first questioned the tournament's appeal, was compelled to recognize the incredible phenomenon surrounding Alexandra Eala and her followers, local news stations sent camera teams to document the amazing spectacles taking place outside the stadium. However, the admirers would eventually vanish just as abruptly as they had appeared. The match that would propel Eala into her first WTA 500 final, the semi-final, was meant to be her pinnacle. Rather, it turned into an agonizing conclusion to an incredible run. Linda Noskova, a gifted 20-year-old Czech player who had already defeated Eala 6-2, 6-0 at Indian Wells earlier in the season, stood across the net. Noskova proved to be a challenging opponent once more. She was able to control rallies from the first stroke because to her booming serve, which produced 9 aces and forced numerous short returns, making it the game's defining weapon. As Noskova blasted 33 wins during the match, Eala, who seemed to be battling with discomfort in her elbow and shoulder, battled to find answers. The scoreboard showed 6-2, 6-4 after just 1 hour and 9 minutes. Thousands of fans had been enthralled with the magical run, but it was now over. Despite her obvious disappointment, Eala departed the court at Steffi Graf Stadium with her head held high. Even though he lost, the 21-year-old had accomplished something that no other Filipino tennis player had ever done. She had advanced to her first WTA 500 semifinal, defeated a world number 2, defeated a world number 8, placed in the top 30, and won $99,506 in prize money. Even though the trophy would eventually belong to someone else, millions had been inspired by her breakthrough. The supporters did not jeer, object, or show outrage as she left the court. Rather, many cheered her outstanding accomplishment while standing with tears in their eyes. Then, understanding that they had seen a momentous occasion in Filipino tennis, they silently and respectfully departed the stadium one by one. Thousands of Filipino supporters left the stadium one by one. They had come from Australia as well as London, Paris, Rome, and Madrid. They had spent money they could hardly afford, taken time off from work, stood in queue for hours to get tickets, and proudly waved Philippine flags while singing Laban Alex.
They stopped speaking.
For them, Alexandra Eala's loss in the semi-final had practically put an end to the competition. The tournament organizers couldn't believe what they saw when they glanced around the arena the next day. A small crowd saw the Berlin Open final, an event designed to highlight some of the best women's tennis players. Much of the stadium was empty, while Jessica Pegula and Linda Noskova fought for the title. There were now only a few fans in the stands that had been crammed during Eala's game. It was hard to overlook the contrast. WTA representatives and tournament organizers were astounded to see firsthand the remarkable impact of the Filipino fan base. After the occurrence, one tournament official acknowledged that what had happened was unprecedented. The influence of Alexandra Eala's presence was underestimated. The Filipino community came to watch her, not just to watch tennis. They had no motive to stay after she was eliminated. That conclusion was supported by the data. After Eala won the quarterfinals, the semifinals sold out relatively instantly, but the title match didn't draw nearly as much attention. Nothing could replicate the mood that had surrounding Eala's incredible race, despite the organizers' best efforts to offer discounted tickets and free admittance for nearby schools. Through their absence, the fans had conveyed their message. She watched from the stands. Eala was struck by how much support she had gotten over the course of the week. She was aware that she had lost the semi-final, but she also knew that the events in Berlin had involved much more than just one outcome. Her fans' fervor, devotion, and pride had changed the competition and shown the tennis community that a new force had emerged on the international scene. Alexandra Eala would always remember the tournament. "Berlin, you are so amazing," she stated in an emotional social media post. "I'm grateful for everything." A lesson that earlier competitions like the Australian Open, Dubai Open, and Italian Open had already started to grasp was discreetly internalized by the tennis community. Never undervalue the Filipino diaspora. They don't just turn up. They come in large enough numbers to completely change the sport's mood and economics. And they depart equally quickly when their champion is ousted. The final was eventually played, and Jessica Pegula lifted the trophy. But the empty seats told a story. Eala had evolved into more than just a tennis player. She had become a movement, and the sport was just starting to understand what that meant. However, beneath the larger phenomenon, her semi-final loss remained a painful conclusion to an incredible run. Linda Naskova, a 20-year-old Czech player who had previously destroyed Eala 6-2, 6-0 at Indian Wells earlier in the match, proved to be a challenging matchup. Eala appeared to be hampered by pain in her